meeting on that day.
You know, I know there's a lot of work goes into it, and I appreciate it. And I'm sure that many others do too. Could you go ahead and call the roll, please, Mr. Rob?
Evelyn Hill.
Here.
Scott Mast.
Here.
Freddie Phipps.
Here.
Rick Snyder. Mike Taylor.
Here. We do have a quorum. Mr. Snyder has indicated that he's putting up hay today, so you've got to do that when the sun's shining, and good opportunity. Doesn't look like it's going to be with us all week, does it, Freddie? It's going to get wet. That's the latter part. But we do have a quorum. We'll go ahead and begin by looking at the minutes from the meeting we had on May 26th. If you want to look at those, I'll entertain a motion to accept those whenever you're ready.
Make a motion.
Motion by Ms. Evelyn Hill to accept them, seconded by Mr. Scott Mast. Call the roll, please.
Evelyn Hill.
Yes.
Scott Mast.
Yes.
Freddie Phipps.
Yes.
Mike Taylor.
Yes. 4 yeses, that motion carries and the minutes are approved. We will now move into item number 3, which is presentation of the 2021 budget. Mr. Robinson,
Okay.
everybody bring a red pen. He does.
All right. Where we left this last week was we presented a budget that had everything in it. All department requests, all the officials raised, the mid-year health insurance increase, and from the consensus of last week, I've actually gone back and put in a 2% cost of living increase for all county employees as well. So that brought us to roughly $438,000 out of balance. Well, I basically committed last week to this process. And since I'm at work, I have access to the computer, I've got more access to resources here than I do at home, I have been able to trim that down to over $402,000. And what I'll do is we'll start and I'll go through and explain to you how I arrived at that number. In your packet, you'll find a bunch of them, and you'll want the first one that starts where it says revenue and expense, shows total adjustments on it. That's the one I'm going to start with. It's probably under that one, Miss Evelyn, right there. No, the one you have in your hand.
Oh, this one there.
Yes, goes to that second page, right there. That's it. All right, basically how I arrived at this, I went back and I looked at some trends, and I looked at what we anticipate to come in and some of these revenues. Actually, I went through every line of the budget last week and looked at things. And basically, these are some recommendations that I'm coming up with to make some revenue adjustments. Cable TV franchise tax. We originally started with $70,000, which was the same amount as the current year. After looking at it and looking at the trend for a couple of years, we see an average annual increase between $3,000 and $5,000 a year with cable franchise tax. So with that being said, we're going to be close to $73,000 for this year based on if the fourth quarter payment comes in, which it should come in roughly at the same amount as the other 3 quarters. I'm recommending that we bump that to $3,000 to make it $73,000. Then I went through some of the court costs, and I looked at officer costs in a couple of places, and I'm making a $1,500 adjustment into officer cost revenues. One I believe is criminal court, the other is circuit court. Drug control fines, a small increase there. Jail fees in one of the courts, and I think that is General Sessions, moving it from $18,000 to $20,000 with a $2,000 increase. I looked at some trends regarding the driver's license reinstatement fee. I feel that we can add another $300 back there. The booking fee, we can roughly put $500 back there. The telephone commission, now this one is up and down depending on what's going on, but looking at the 2 years worth of a trend, I had originally bumped that from $20,000 to $25,000. I think we can go another $2,500 to $27,500. Then we get over into the fees in lieu of salary. This is where the officials turn part of their revenues back over to us. Clerk and master, I originally made a $20,000 cut. After looking at the trends, I think it's going to be more like $55,000 for this year, so I've reinstated $5,000 back. Same thing with the Register of Deeds, $5,000 back. And then I also took a look at the driver's license convenience fees. Convenience is actually spelled wrong there. And decided that we're probably looking somewhere between $9,000 and $10,000 this year, so I went ahead and bumped that to 10. So I made $21,000 worth of revenue adjustments, which brings that 438 down to about 418. Then I started looking at some expenditures, and I started looking at vacancies that we currently have in the budget. And we have a vacancy with the Election Commission that will be filled this month. And then the sheriff has a couple of vacancies in the sheriff's department, and there were at the time 4 vacancies, not counting the 2 new proposed positions in the jail. So I went back and I looked. 9 times out of 10, when we hire an individual now, they're subject to being placed in the hybrid form of TCRS and also the 6-month probationary period. So basically, there's 6 months that we never pay any retirement on that individual whatsoever. So I went back through and I looked at 6-month spans, and I adjusted to compensate taking 6 months worth of retirement out of those categories, both in the 204 line as well as the 217 line, because those 2 together make up hybrid TCRS. Then I started looking at medical insurance. The sheriff had filled a couple of vacancies in the jail, and as those happen, until the budget's approved, I make those changes. And I had insurance budgeted on the high end, which is roughly $7,000 a year for the policy for a 90/10. 90% of our folks who work at the jail either take the 80/20 or the 70/30 policies. And there is a difference between almost $2,500 if you go from the 90/10 to the 70/30. But the last 2 individuals that were hired, they went with the 80/20. So I adjusted all of these insurance in the jail to an 80/20 policy, and that actually saved us another $3,200. Then there's a couple of vacancies that are actually in the sheriff's department, and one of those vacancies is pretty well left open as a cushion matter, but I also keep a little bit of insurance attached to it. I actually dropped that one to the 70/30 policy. So when I made all those adjustments with retirement and medical insurance on the vacancies, that saved us another $14,500. So those 2 combined, the 21.3 and the 14.5, actually put 35,808. It actually reduced that out of balance function by 35, almost $36,000, which gets us to roughly the 403 that we're at. So any questions about that?
So you've seen enough data, you're comfortable with it?
I'm comfortable, you know,
Okay.
with this. I mean, with the understanding that next year we may go the opposite direction with it. But the trend right now says that it would be here. So then I started looking at a couple of other things. But before I get to that, I want to drop back up and punt just a second. In your sheet, in your packet, you have a sheet that says Contractor Prisoner Board on it. Since we had met last week, the March payment had come in, which was $55,263. The April payment, I called Trish this afternoon, and she gave me that she had submitted $44,538 to the state for payment. That's roughly 38 inmates as an average. So I used the same amount for May and June to get us roughly, if we collect $44,500 for the next 2 months, then we're going to bring in about $605,000. That puts us about that's $195,000 shy of the $800,000 that we've been budgeting. All right, based on our conversations that we've had a couple of times, I've actually cut that to $690, which still puts us $90,000 more projected than what actually is anticipated to come in for this fiscal year. So we may have to revisit this one more time next year, unless you feel that it's prudent to go ahead and try to cut some of that additional to lessen that gap. But there's basically 10 years worth of historical trends of actual, the amounts that are listed below that where it says difference, these are the actual amounts that came in those fiscal years.
So we're gonna cut it this year.
Okay.
We're losing
Well, Eddie
$70,000 a year.
felt confident he could do 50. We set it at 45.
5. So I think,
Once we get past,
once we get past a lot of this COVID mess and the state starts moving inmates again, I think the 45 is probably something that
Here's what
is,
I'm hoping,
is,
is the state won't move inmates, that they won't receive any in the state jails for a while, or state prisons. That'll cause an overload in the jails and they can ding us for it, so we could run over. So, I guess it just depends on when they start taking people in state prison.
how many would they have to have on? And they were like $37
I think it was 37.
or something.
If you even take that and divide it by the 42, it's still almost like 60 inmates to hit that 800.
No, what about this $1.4 million?
Oh, look, that one was before my time, so I don't know.
How many inmates did you have it?
We had them
I mean, that,
sleeping in the hall.
I mean, that was probably when they were stacked all over the place.
So we had a different jail inspector.
Probably $37 a day. It had to have over 100. It had to have 103. So there's no
September
county employees, or county
2014
prisoners in there.
was when, Sheriff Reese made the
Good grief.
proclamation that he's gonna cut that in half. If they didn't,
103.
it's like,
All right. So, Freddie, you're saying better just leave it as it is right now. Get past the COVID thing. See if it back up. I agree.
surely it's gonna turn back around. I mean, we see that how it used to be in the prior years. I know it's been going down, but you look at 3 years ago, it's in the mid-70s, mid-70s. We are getting another district attorney up here that I hope will be a little better about these percentages, since her dad's a sheriff.
It's 45.
Maybe she'll understand that if it's
$42
somebody
a day.
It's 42.
75%,
That's why I'm thinking it might go up.
It might go up. And
and it doesn't change then. I mean, Leon said here, told us it don't.
Yeah, 689.
Yeah, I think I
But
paid
he's leaving.
690.
That might happen.
Washington County.
He's gonna do drug cases all over, so hopefully he'll stick with felons. And Ms. Lunsford will do the misdemeanors, maybe we'll come out.
So any questions about that?
Any questions?
All right, then we'll turn to our third sheet, where at the bottom it says department request, department/budget request. One of the things that we did this fiscal year that left us some wiggle room was we have a pretty substantial amount of excess sales tax going into debt service above what we budget. And last year we shifted $2,500 a month from debt service to county general to aid in our balancing. Lisa Crowder and I talked about this for 2 or 3 days, and we went back and looked at the data for several years, and we both come to the conclusion and can recommend that it is safe that we can shift an additional $3,500 a month from debt service to county general. So that would generate $42,000 more in sales tax revenue that would be going into the county general fund and not going into debt service fund. At this point, that would leave, based on if the trends continue, that debt service would still be receiving about $75,000 to $80,000 a year in sales tax, and we need 60 to come in to be able to hit the revenue projections. So with that being said, shifting $42,000 to county general off of the 403 gets us to about 365, 366. I had conversation with Sheila Shaw with the city, and the city is actually having a meeting tonight, and Sheila is hoping that they will finalize and approve things tonight. And we talked about several things. Some I'll talk about when we get down to the expenditures, because some of it's interesting. But we also did talk about the senior center. And one of the things that the senior center did was their board went to the city council and made a $5,000 additional request in funding from the city. Sheila said that it was not in the budget as of last week, but it was on the to-do list to try to work it in. So there's a very good potential that there could be another $5,000 in additional revenue from the city to help offset some of our operating expense for the senior center. But I did not put that $5,000 into any of this mix. I left it out since it's still not approved. But if it is approved, then that's $5,000 more to our side that would be to the good. So the only thing that I'm looking at this point is doing as far as a revenue shift would be sales tax, which is $42,000. Then I started looking at expenditures.
Before we go to expenditures, can I mention a conversation I had with Dave Garrett today?
Yeah.
Have you had that conversation with Dave?
I haven't talked today.
When the governor came out with some of these monies back there at the beginning of the COVID, when businesses were closing and those kind of things, there was a $30,000,
Part of the CARES Act.
yeah, part of the CARES Act, $30,000 that would have gone directly to Dave as the operator of that business. Dave brought a letter to me today, and I'll share it with the county commission at our next meeting, that because we allowed him to build that apartment on and to live down there and allowed him to be there and take care of his wife and stuff, he's going to forego that. He's going to let that go into county general. He's going to request $4,000 to match some monies he's going to do for some runway lights or reflectors or something. That the county's portion of the match would be $4,000 of the grant. And he's wanting to ask if he could use $4,000 of that, but otherwise the $26,000 would go to county general.
Mm-hmm.
Can we put this into the mix, or what would you recommend?
Well, the thing with the CARES Act, it's not just the airport. The library is also going to qualify for some money from the CARES Act, as well as the school system. And I'm making an assumption that with Dave, with it being aeronautics, it will go through the aeronautics division, which means I think there will be a state contract issued and some other things that will take place just like any other funding. I just don't, it will surprise me to see if that money just shows up and there's no paper trail from the state side to track it. And so therefore, we can put that into the mix, but it would technically, we would have to earmark it for use with the airport, since that's the way the provisions of how they're writing it would be, just like it's the money for the library would be written to that certain specific functionality, just like the school system is writing a proposal to use that $705,000 that they're supposed to receive in CARES Act money.
That kind of indicated that this would have been personally to him as the business owner, but because of the losses he would have incurred.
But I thought with the way we wrote that letter, he forgoes that, which meant that it would come to the county.
Yes. Yeah, that was his wishes, that he doesn't get it in his account, that it goes to the county.
And, and I think that's pretty well what will happen, but
So wait and see where the money
I think
comes.
wait and see where the money, we actually need to wait and see if the money actually just shows up. But if I know the state, there will be contracts, there will be things that will have to be put into place before that money actually appears. And actually, none of these budgets have any of the CARES Act money in it. Even what the school system will bring next week does not have any of the CARES Act money. That will all be amended once this budget is approved into the new year, once we see exactly how it's going to flow and exactly what kind of tracking we're going to have to do with it.
So wait and see where it shows up.
Wait and see if it shows up.
For my 2 cents, what it's worth, I like what you said about earmarking it, keeping it airport money, and then whenever another grant
Yeah,
comes
matches.
available, we'll have matching funds there
For
too,
that.
for that match.
And I think that's sort of what Dave's intent was with it, was to help us use, to keep a local reserve to be able to cover our 5 to 10% when one of those contracts come up.
If he's willing to do that, then we need to keep it there for the airport instead of spending it on a roof on this building or something.
So, I mean, I think it's still a wait and see, but even if it works like the Obama era, what was called the ERA funds, everything was contract-based. I'm going back to my time with the school system, but we received allocations, we received contracts, and we had to submit budgets and all those things for that to be approved for those monies were actually available to us. And I do not see the CARES Act being any differently. There will need to be an approval, there'll be a contract, there'll be a budget, and then the comptroller's office will monitor to make sure that we do use the money for what the proposal said it was going to be used for. Because I know Linda with the library, they're wanting to do some technology upgrades. I think she said they're eligible for maybe about $16,000. And I basically indicated to her we'll deal with that once this budget's approved.
I'm done with that.
Okay. All right. Then I started looking at expenditures. All right, I'm going to preface and say something here before we get into this. When I went through the budget and I pulled anything that was new or anything that had an increase other than personnel, I pulled out for us to take a look at it, with the exception of the 2 additional correctional officers. And I started looking at this, and I thought, how can we be equitable to the taxpayer, but also be equitable to our department heads in these different departments? And I came up with a proposal that I ran by the mayor earlier today, that some of these cuts, as we look at them, I will establish a reserve out of this year's budget to use in next year's budget to cover some of these cuts if we need to cover them. If we do not use this reserve at the end of 2021, I will allow it to roll itself back into undesignated fund balance. So therefore, it's a win-win situation. It helps us balance this budget and deal with the least tax increase that we need, but also it ensures these departments, as we go through and we look at my recommendations, that we will set some money aside and earmark it, and will only use it if we need to use it to cover an overage because of the fact that we made the cut. Does that make sense? Yeah. So basically, with that being said, it also keeps the mayor from having to listen to everybody complain that I recommend we do this or do that, as opposed and bump over other departments. Now, not every department has cut up front. I will tell you, not every department has cut. I intentionally left some of the small increases because they're actually needed. So we'll start with legal services, to pick on the attorney. I had increased that $3,350. After looking at it, I'd like to leave $1,850 of that to do a bump, but go ahead and reserve $1,500 of that. So $1,500 of that would move up our entire reserve that was created at the end of the year. Then our next area that's a big increase, that is an increase, it's not necessarily a big increase because this happens every 2 to 4 years, we have election cycles. I went back and I looked at the last presidential cycle, which would have been the 16-17 fiscal year. That would have been a year that we would have had 2 elections. We would have had a midterm election and a presidential cycle. I also took a look at what we actually paid out for the presidential primary this year. Looking at that, and even taking into effect that there may be a slight bump in increase in what we pay poll workers, and even have to have some additional poll workers to be able to deal with any COVID-related issues. I think, based on what I see, $18,000 should cover election workers per election. Now, that's just covering the actual workers, the poll workers that day. It covers the early voting, and it covers what transpires that night as far as counting board and all those things. We're not talking about technicians. We're not talking about election commissions. They're totally in different areas. And what we have budgeted for both technicians and for the election commission at this point is adequate. No fluff there. But I feel that we should be able to conduct 2 elections somewhere between $35,000 and $40,000 for the 2 elections, looking at the trends and even taking into account even increasing the base pay. I may be wrong, but based on what I can see, that's what I'm going to recommend, that we actually reduce that from $50,000 to $38,000 and reserve $12,000 in this reserve to use in the event there's an overage.
Okay,
Yeah, I almost want to get clear on, when you say reserve,
Mm-hmm.
is this gonna show it's coming off of our budget?
No, it'll actually, it'll come off of our fund balance. When I take, because what we, basically, I'll determine what the total fund balance is for county general. Then we have to start looking at the set-asides. Some of these set-asides are required by law, data processing for officials, those kind of things like that. We also look at the standing that we have, like with the sheriff, with some of his reserves. I would simply establish, with the approval of the legislative body, to set aside a reserve that's $20,000, will be $20,000 in my recommendation, for us to use if we have overages where we've made cuts to balance. And if we don't use it at the end of the year, next year, I allow it to roll itself back to undesignated fund balance. So it's a win-win situation. It helps us on the front end, but it also ensures the departments that we're making these cuts at, that if we need the money will be there. And we're not taking it directly from fund balance. We'll take it from a reserve that we establish locally. Does that help?
Yeah.
Then our next place that I see that we can potentially do some cutting and reserving would be with the fact that we're going to go through a reappraisal. And Matthew had asked for an additional $5,000 to cover some of the expenses. It will be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000, going back and looking at the data from 4 years ago. So basically what I did was I'm splitting the difference and leave $2,500 in this budget, reserve $2,500 to cover any overages that we would have in regards to his request of the $5,000 to cover the reappraisal. Our next stop would be the circuit court clerk. She had made a request for additional $4,000 to cover the expenses that are related to feeding juries because of 2 potential murder trials. Perry and I had this conversation last week, and looking at the trends of some things that are going on with the fact that the court system has functioned at minimum now for almost 2 months, chances are those are probably going to be pushed off. We could potentially use it, potentially 1, but probably not 2. So what I'm going to recommend that we do is cut that in half, leave $2,000 in the budget, reserve $2,000.
Well, if they get caught up and actually have it, you got it.
Then we've got it if we need it.
And then if they don't, makes sense.
Our next area, that's a big area, the sheriff had asked for some additional money for contracted services in the sheriff's department in his budget in the 54-110. The bulk of what is used for that, as he mentioned when he was here, is we cover the contracted services that are required to do the fingerprinting and some things like that. Looking at the trend, we're somewhere around 22,000, 23,000 this year that we'll end the year with. So basically, I'm saying let's leave 3,000 of that in, increase that line to 23,000, and reserve 2,000 of it, that if we need it, it will be there. Then we get to the 2 new positions that are in the jail. Now, what I've came up with this scenario is that with my recommendation, it'll be left up to you, and the mayor and I had a discussion about this today. I actually am leaving 1 of those new positions in the budget and removing 1. And it's roughly $28,000 to $29,000 to be able to cover starting pay and benefits for a correctional officer. That's where, so therefore, I'm leaving 1, taking 1 out. So that's 1 of the 2. And then I'll let the mayor pick it up from there.
well, when you think about it, we're having a tax increase, more than likely.
More than likely.
That's 1 penny on the tax increase right there. And Eddie, when he was here, kind of sat over there and kind of indicated that, you know, he could work around that if necessary.
Has he got a full house now?
He still has 2 vacancies of his original 19. Now those could be filled, and we've just not seen the paperwork yet.
Under normal conditions, I would, you know, say I'd like to see us keep 1. But under the conditions we yet have in his budget the $46,000 for the 1 patrol car.
Yes.
It's going to come out of capital project.
Capital projects,
And
we're actually budgeting
if we
50
get
for
the
that.
grant that I have applied for, there's another vehicle in there.
In there.
So, you know, That's just my feeling on it, but we'll go with what all of y'all want to do. I would think. But when we're thinking about tax increase, that's basically 1 penny right there.
That was just my recommendation. We'll circle back around to that one.
Sure.
Then our next stop is 911. And this is where I had a very interesting conversation with Sheila last week. And actually, I called the mayor, and he's at the beach, because I wanted to hear his reaction when I told him what I'd found out. As of last week, 911 had made no request to the city for additional funding. They'd only made that request to the county. So basically, 911 has asked for $40,000 additional dollars in the past 2 years, the current year that we're in plus the year that we're looking at. Last year, you funded $10,000 of this request, which was half of it. I started looking at it and decided, what if we cut that in half again to 5? So basically, what I'm recommending is we take 15 of that 20 out and leave 5, which is roughly a 5.9, almost a 6% increase over current year. Any questions, any suggestions on that one?
I agree, they didn't need anything from the city, they won't do 20 from that.
Because that Sheila said he had made no
Think we should take
request to the
5?
city.
Well, you're leaving the 5.
Is 5, you put that in there for salary adjustments alone, or what was the reasoning?
That's what he said last year.
That's what he said last year was to help them,
Or the 20,000.
that he was going to, that they would use what we gave them to help equalize some of the starting pay and the benefit.
They don't take count for the 2%. They don't.
Totally different. Or they're only going to receive from us whatever we fund them.
So they're not county employees for the 2% increase?
No, they are considered to be 911 employees, and they're operated and governed by the 911 board. So what I'm proposing is we leave 5, cut 15.
So what's the
Current,
salary cost down there, roughly, round number?
I can't answer that, just looking back.
I can't remember.
He
Last
said
year we
starting-
calculated how much 20,000 was for each of them.
Starting, didn't he say that would move the starting pay to like almost $10 an hour or something? It might have been a little bit more than that. Because I know looking at the, Johnson County still pays less, is the least paying county as far as starting dispatcher pay is concerned. And even this 5 would make another adjustment to that starting pay.
And he said they didn't have no trouble keeping the chairs full.
No. Because actually, we've actually had a couple of 911 employees actually migrate to our side this year.
So what y'all feel, do we keep the 5,000 in, or do we take it along with the other?
So last year he asked for 20, we gave him 10. He came back and asked for another 20 this year. So if we'd have given him the 20 last year, would he have asked for another 20 this year?
I can't answer that.
It's hard to say. I mean, we're at 75% with that 5 of what of fulfilling what he asked for last year, and he didn't go to the city for anything. So I'm definitely not inclined to exceed that 5,000.
And also from your figures here, that's a 5.9% increase. If it is for wages, that's way more than anybody else in the county gets.
Yes.
If it is for wages.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that,
That's what his memo said every time. That it's
matter of fact, I believe that's what his request said here as well.
I got it this year. Usually I get it.
Yeah, it was in our packet. I just didn't bring the old one.
Got it. Along with everything else.
But it's in there. Here it is, the David Eddings here. Yeah.
We've increased our starting pay to $10,000 this past budget year. We did this to retain current employees and get a more desirable pay scale to hire dispatchers. In doing this, we've had to draw a large amount of our money from the reserves to cover this expense, which is a no-no according to this. Then it goes on, it says dispatching, and basically, he gave some average rates. Carter County is between $10.90 to $11.45 start pay. Unicoi is $12.75. I throw Boone completely out because it's in a different state. Bristol's $14.02, Kingsport's $14.36, Sullivan County's $14.08, Washington County's $13.46.
Only comparable I heard there was Carter County. Unicoi, maybe, but Washington and Sullivan are not even, we're not in there.
The census people see it that way too. I think the census workers in Sullivan County are getting like $16 to $18 an hour, and they're getting 13 here, I think, 13.
And we're currently funding at $85,000. So $5 additional thousand would actually move that to $90,000, which is 75% of the original 20 from last year, as you put it, or I'd looked at it that it's roughly 30% of the 40. Which,
If he says anything to you, Mayor, then ask him, why did you request something from the state?
Yeah, that would be my question.
Cities increased funding,
2,500 would be a
40,000 since he's been on the board.
and actually, I ran it that way too. I looked at it at 3%. I even looked at it
Any
at 2%.
numbers to what their alcohol is bringing in, how much of an increase?
Well, they're doing well.
Sheila made that comment that they were being conservative with their sales tax estimates, and still it's an increase over what it's been in prior years.
People aren't aware that the county, we get none of that. There's
It's also,
We do collect the wholesale beer tax if beer is sold.
But the city is buildings.
Yep. And there is some state excise taxes on some of the alcohol. We do get a percentage of it back, but the Department of Revenue distributes that. That's based on statewide averages.
The school's doing
Schools
very
receive,
well.
schools are getting 50% of the sales tax increase. The city gets the other 50%. And then the city's also collecting some of the alcohol tax.
I think we would be okay if they finally get the liquor vote drink going. I think we get part of that. Not a lot. It's mainly cities and schools that benefit from that.
Well, outside, liquor by the drink will be outside the city limits. Don't think so? Okay. I could be wrong on that one.
Like a brown bag.
So, what's the feeling on the 5,000? Leaving it in or taking it out? What y'all think? Ms. Ellen, do you have any feelings about this either way?
Sound like grandma's gifts. We have to send them back.
Maybe leave it like that and then.
Of course, Scott said, if we know more than that, I wondered whether he cut it more. Since he didn't make a request to the city, if that is not being made yet.
Knowing, in his position, knowing what they were getting revenue-wise from the sales tax, he would have access to those numbers, which would indicate to me he could have asked if they had plenty for his department, I would think, wouldn't it?
Well, and as of right now, they haven't put in that 5,000 for the senior center. I kind of feel.
I think we figured that a while back.
Russell, do you know if the road request for either mayor from the city last year and something to get it?
They did make a request to the city last year, at the same time that they made a request to us. I want to say, but I could be wrong, that the city funded at 100% of the request, but I think that's correct.
It's when we gave the raise to,
Yes.
when we gave the raise to their director and added that as a part-time person.
Well, that may be the explanation why they didn't request it.
That's very, that could be.
Are you talking about the senior center money, or are you talking about the 911.
He's still with
Oh,
911.
okay. Yeah, 911, they made the request last year. I was talking about the $5,000 senior center money. They're contributing a portion to the senior center budget, but they didn't include this $5,000, which would have been an increase.
You know, I was just talking about that.
Yeah,
before.
I get it.
I'm on that senior center, that's all we do.
So,
I
I feel a little better about it if they would have, if they would have done that.
Put 5,000 in for the senior center.
I feel a little.
Last conversation we had about it, the county,
Especially since he's on the board, I mean.
I think we're putting in 92%, they're putting in 8 for the senior center. Isn't that about right, Russ?
Somewhere. Yeah, I've got the numbers.
It is, because the city mayor.
But you might go to
He might
10.
go to 12, I think 12, yeah.
Yeah, something.
We could probably go to 12. I was thinking more like 25.
There's one right behind you. Look,
But,
get one out of the refrigerator.
they'll charge you. Well, you think, Dave?
I'm like Scott, I don't want to put any more than that in it, you know, I know we have good service and we need to have it, and I'm not happy with the fact they didn't ask the city for something too, you know, and they have a good number of residents and people that use it.
Well, that's how he's won vote on that board. And they've already decided he don't have to recuse himself on that vote, apparently.
So you want to leave for now and come back if you.
What Russell said, he thinks the city given their full request last year, then I'll go out with the five.
Okay.
That's,
Okay.
which I strongly disagree with their attorney on that assessment.
We'll catch that up with
I think
Scott when he
he
gets
votes
back.
on 911, he's
You'll wait till
done
Scott
conflict.
gets back. We don't.
Yeah.
He had some reasoning there that he's good about reasoning things. The city funded the full amount last year. Maybe that's right. They didn't go back to them this year and ask us to actually, so Freddie says that's the case. He's okay with leaving the 5 and going on.
That's good.
Thank you.
So we'll leave the 5,000 in, which is roughly a 6% increase. All right, now let's circle back around to the CO position, correctional officer position. I basically have a plan to balance this, which does require a tax increase, leaving one of those positions in, but like the mayor said, that one position is 1 cent on the tax rate. Roughly 1 cent on the tax rate.
So just keep that in the back of your mind, so what you're saying for now.
For right now.
Okay.
All right, with all that being said and done, that means I'm recommending $63,846 worth of cuts, which 20,000 of that would be established in a reserve to put some of it back. But the biggest amount of that is cutting one of those positions that the sheriff requested. Then on the back page, where it starts, it says out of balance. We started this process $402,546 out of balance. If we do the recommended reductions of $63,846 and the $42,000 shift in sales tax from debt service, that brings this budget to $296,700 out of balance. Using $28,875 for an estimate of what a penny will generate. 10 cents on the tax rate next year will generate $298,750. And with the change of the tax aggregate percentages, the next biggest thing that would it affect would be that we would pick up an additional $1,620 in payments in lieu of taxes from the Parkdale money, would actually put $300,370 additional dollars into this budget, leaving us with a fund balance equity surplus of $30,670 out the gate. That balances it based on the recommendations. And I also ran some numbers looking at putting a little bit of a cushion, because we are coming up on almost 5 years since our last increase. If we were to do 12 cents, that would generate $358,500, an additional $2,220 in payment in lieu, which is roughly $64,000 additional dollars that would go into fund balance off the gate, or equity off the gate. Then, to shoot high on the moon, to do 15 cents would be $448,000, another $3,100 there, which is a total of $451,000, or we would be putting roughly $155,000 in equity to fund balance from the beginning.
What was the last increase?
The last thing
23?
is somewhere in the 20s, 23,
21 or 23,
23, I believe. It was less than 25, but,
So,
and it was 4 years ago.
5 years later, 15's a lot better than 23.
It is.
Somebody there, you calculated, or you own $100,000. That's over property, what will 10 cents increase that?
Well,
If
you
you
base,
do
you
12,
base
12
it,
cents is 5.8%. But probably what you're paying now. Let's say your taxes $1,100. I would add 6% to that, so
20%,
$66. 15% would be, an increase of like a 7.3%.
Taxes go up $142.
You know, we had some options. We had that sales tax option back there on the ballot back 2 years ago. That would have probably broke us about even with Russell like I figured. But if we did the 12 cents, that would give us, and if we took 12 cents and the jail worker, you're looking at at 29,000 too. So you're looking at $100,000.
$100,000, $25,000 would be assessment.
If you do
250,
a 15-cent tax increase,
2,500 units.
take the jail position, you're looking at close to $185,000 toward
That's
fund
break
balance.
down in units to get it to work.
We're doing,
If we just, go ahead, if we just do the 9 cents or 10 and leave the position, you know, you got $3,600 next year. Next year of appraisal year,
it's gonna be hard to raise it next
we
year.
don't want to revisit.
There's additional hoops we jump through to be able, if we go above the certified rate, there are some additional hoops that we have to jump through to be able to do that. And one of those is we have to have a special hearing that deals with that.
Next year's election.
I can't
So
see,
Your 6%, your 6% increase is on the 10 cents or 12.
12.
So if your tax is $1,000, it's $1,060. If we get 12.
That's about, yeah.
You know, the mayor and I play,
You know, it might be a little bit different when you apply it, but that's going to be really close.
That's just down.
I would be looking at somewhere between 50 and 60 additional dollars using 12 cents.
City don't think they're going to have a tax increase this year. They
No.
think with this
They think
new revenue of the alcohol sales, they're going
Or
County
you
tax
can
base on
take that one position and go 14, that sounds
to
like,
875 to 900.
14 sounds better than a round, you know, 5 number. Yeah, like the 99 cent on your store thing makes it sound like that. I'm not gonna go 14.
You know, 12 cents, $60, we spend that much going out to eat twice. Because Mary and I can eat for an average of $30.
We wanna have these reserves, so I wouldn't wanna pull that out too.
and if we have to put one of them in that reserve,
And that would get out of the budget
yeah,
That would.
and
if we're, I mean, if,
to that.
rather than pull it completely out, I think he's gonna feel better about it if we put it in a reserve in case we've got to do it.
So what would that make the reserve?
50. It would be, if I'd round that to 30,000, I would do a reserve for 50,000.
To make the reserve 50, that's good.
Then that way, we're pulling one and we're reserving one, but we're not putting that in on it, and if we don't need it, then it's,
Which means that we could
Yeah,
do a
reveals
12,
there,
do a 12 and
right?
Freddie, I think you'd have around 100,000 cushion.
I think what Scott's saying is take both of them out, but reserve one,
Yeah.
which is 30,000, which would knock him back to the 19 positions he currently has, counting the jail administrator.
And when he left here, was it last meeting
Oh, no.
or meeting before
Two or
last?
three
It's been a couple of meetings.
He was agreeable, I thought, to holding where he was. You know, I think I asked him at current levels, is there any point in filling those positions with 2 additional ones? And he didn't seem to feel like it would hurt him to not fill.
But if he ever does fill the position, it becomes a permanent spot
That's right.
in the budget.
Sure does. Once you fill it, it becomes
Well,
permanent.
I think I like your plan. I can live with that plan. Let me put that with the reserve money. That doesn't get it out of the, are you okay with that? Which would, Freddie, if we don't, just to balance the budget, then at that point, it would take 9 cents.
Yeah.
And 9 cents would be an increase of, raise your taxes by, 4.3%. So if you're paying $700, it'd raise you $35, basically.
You're not
Rounding up.
building any cushion there.
Yeah, but $3,500 or so, which is null at this point. But,
Which
and
is
another
what good
point
law
that
says.
you can think about too is that a number of our elderly folks have signed up for the tax relief, and I'm gonna get that number from Lisa about how many of our folks get that. You know, there's some qualifications about how much money you make and your age and stuff.
So we would have had that today, but she's actually
Mm,
at the beach this week,
that happens.
taking some
But, we'll
taking
find
some
out.
leave with 2 young boys, so.
That's the thing that bothers me a lot on it, is what this does to our elderly folks, and a lot of them are on that tax relief plan, which, you know, will help them. And so,
Well, I think it's my duty, Russell, to ask you, is there any other way to cut this without that tax increase?
The only way that we can do that is we basically will have to strip off, any proposed increase to employees. And actually, that still won't get all of it.
what was that, 64,000?
$64,360.
Basically 2 pennies.
That's
right there.
roughly 2 cents. 18,362, which would be the mid-year health insurance increase that we at that point pass along to employees. The 30,831 we have to do because it's mandated. That's the officials increase. Then simply we can go through and we can take the $500 increase here, the $300 increase here, taking.
Still, it's not going
We can close the gap, but in the long and the short, we might shave 2 pennies off, or 3. Well, if we take the increases off the board, we can probably conservatively 3 to 4 cents.
I just am opposed to taking those increases off when we got mandated increases for the department heads or the elected officials. Putting the,
And that big projection on the highway department, yeah.
And actually, you bring that up, they sent to me this evening some revised, numbers, and they're better. It appears right now that if we take they gave a minimum and a minimum loss, which is 20% or a 25% reduction. We would be looking at, or just looking at, anywhere between $327,000 to $410,000 less, which is better than the original $515.
515 last time.
And if we split that difference, that's actually going to let him put about somewhere between $55,000 and $60,000 back into his budget. And after looking at these numbers, I'm comfortable in doing that and cutting that difference, but that would still mean that he's potentially covering part of that loss with fund balance.
But the little bit of the employees raise is about 2 cents, you said, 60.
Yeah, 66.
I tell you, it's a lot easier to do business
When
when
you-
you got good employees.
When we get further into, to make any cuts that would get us where we need to be, probably have to talk about employees, wouldn't we?
Yes.
About taking,
Honestly,
down.
we're to the point,
yeah.
if we
I think that's
balance
kinda where we
this
are.
with no tax increase, we gotta do reduction in force.
So it's not our expenditures, it's our revenue
It's more of a revenue,
problem.
expenditures, probably some of it, because we're seeing increases in
Some growth,
expenditures,
yeah.
but it's more the revenue side right now.
And there's nothing to do about revenue.
Can't keep county folks out of jail,
No.
keep state folks. out.
No, I don't
Illegal.
wanna do nothing like that. I just wanna get my mind
It'd be nice,
around all of it.
be nice to
Nobody,
have
I
that.
don't think anybody in this room hates a
Be
tax
nice to
increase
have that
more than I do.
10,000.
Especially sitting in the chair where I'm sitting, people are gonna, they're gonna be upset. But Russell and I've looked at this a lot.
But we've ran these numbers backwards and
And when we
forward.
get to the point that we're gonna have to start laying off employees, that'd be a difficult decision there. I don't know that we have a surplus of employees anywhere that you could cut from. I don't know where you're getting from.
I really don't. I mean, unfortunately, it just becomes a reduction in force.
For a long time, I always have.
Yeah.
Always have.
Yeah, I've been to just about every one of these since 14, and I've never seen a budget committee that's wasted money. They've always cut, always been conservative. We got good people that try to save money and try to do good.
I think.
I'm really happy with the slate of people we got to work for us.
To answer your question, if I take the insurance increase, the 2% increase for regular county employees, and add the mandated officials increase to it, it takes roughly 4 cents to cover that.
But even if we take the sheriff position, put it in reserve, like Scott said, the very minimum, with what we've talked about here tonight, is gonna be 9 cents.
It's gonna be 9 cents.
So this is just a thought, one thought to them, so if we present this to the full commission, and we let them know that 9 is the minimum we can do. If you wanna set a little cushion for the next year, or the next year, we're looking at 12. But that'd be the highest I would vote for now, just one vote, now you tell me what you think.
I feel it.
Can we give them a range, or do we have to give them a number? I think we have to give them. You have to approve out of committee a proposed tax rate. Now, you can, like, if Freddie says 12 is the most he would do, and there's a consensus, then you can approve out of committee a tax rate that would be $2.17, which is 12 cents more than what it currently is. That's what you present, that's what would be presented to the commission. And at that point, they can either reject it, accept it, or say, no, we're sending it back to committee, do less than that. At that point, you have to get direction from them that throws it back to this body to reapprove another rate out of committee. I'm saying I don't think we're allowed to do 215 or 217.
No,
We have to do one or the
we have to do one or the other. You have to recommend a proposed tax rate to them. And it's just a recommendation. Now, ultimately, they make that decision.
We can make it clear to them that is our recommendation, that them knowing that, not putting our cents on that is the best we can do to balance it all without cutting positions, cutting raises.
By doing 12 cents, removing that one position that I recommended stay into reserve, we're looking at between $90,000 and $95,000 worth of a cushion going in. It will potentially be more than that because as we change the tax rate, we change the aggregate percentages, and that means that we will increase our percentages on everything that's collected. Some of them I can project, some I cannot, but like prior year trustees collections, clerk of master's collections, interest and penalty, those things I don't try to project when we change the aggregate. typically I look at the fixed things like, for instance, the park donate. So that would get us in the ballpark of about $100,000 worth of equity going in on the front end.
For the next 2 years. Definitely for the next one, because, if you raise it during the reappraisal, that gives big headaches. Not so much the full commission, but
It's gonna be a headache to this committee, and it's
For
a huge
everybody
headache
else.
to myself and the mayor, because of the
everybody
extra
else.
hoops that we jump through to make that work. Not saying it can't be done. We've done it in the past, because last time we had a tax increase was we were coming off of a reappraisal year.
Well, if something happens and we overshoot our projections and our surplus exceeds that 64,000, then in our reappraisal years, there's nothing says we can't cut it next year, is it?
Actually, you can cut a certified rate, you cannot go above a certified rate.
Right.
But
So
if,
if we do 12 this year, if we see we don't need it, or whoever the mayor sees to put on the budget committee next year sees they don't need it, then
Oh, you guys are here for the duration.
you know, and here's the thing, you know, Matthew is confident that we're gonna see an increase in appraisals. So therefore, if property estimates go up, the certified rate goes down.
More
to
than likely,
compensate
it will
for
not be 205.
No, it
Or
will be,
if we go to 217, more than likely, the odds of it being 217 after appraisal is not gonna be the case.
slim to none.
It will, in my opinion, and in Matthew's opinion too, I
It's
think
gonna adjust down.
it's gonna come down. But I don't know, I couldn't sign off on that, but when the appraisals, I think it's.
but that's always 6 to 1.
Yes, isn't it?
The tax
increase
increase,
your claim.
the value of your property, then lower the tax rate, it still comes out to
And
And see, and here's the thing, next year there will be no growth, because we're coming off of new appraisal values. So whatever the appraisal values are and what the state sets the certified rate is what we deal with.
running my business, I've never had a year that it seemed like it was less money that I had to spend. I've had less come in, but it seems like every year it gets more expensive to buy stuff. Computers, paper, when the furniture goes bad, everything's higher. It's the same way at the county. Can't replace the dad, and where's your opinion?
Well, I know we're gonna have to do the 9. My opinion would be to take the position that he mentioned, put in reserve, to get us to a 9, otherwise we'd be at 10. Get to the 9, I think you'd be, from a political standpoint, I think it'd be easier to get a 12 through the county commission than it would a 15.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, with that being said, you know, I would at least like to go into next year with that cushion, if we could, of $100,000, because I don't know what the appraisal really is
Gonna be.
gonna do to us.
And honestly, we operate roughly on about an $8 million a year budget. We should have at least 10% of that as undesignated, which would roughly be $800,000. We're about $550. We really need to make a hard look at figuring out ways that we can increase that fund balance to be able to cover the next time we have a huge revenue shortfall, to be able to do that, because honestly, something catastrophic could literally, in essence, it could bankrupt the county.
But the 15-cent thing, where that came in, there for a while, we thought this number was gonna be 11 or 12.
11 or 12, we really
And
did.
so we were looking for a 3-cent, 4-cent cushion. So if we get that to 9, that'll give you a 3 cents to go to 12. Kind of help do that. I was happy to see it come down. Honestly, Russell and I were thinking 11 or 12.
We really were.
You know, 2 weeks ago. But today, I think we can get that down to 9. Doing as Scott has suggested, putting that other position in the reserves with that other money and.
Roughly 6% increase.
Roughly, yeah, if you look at, 12 cents.
What they want, want to know that, so somebody asked me, you know, what,
Figure it too, Russ, I'll make sure, so 112 divided by 2.15, about 5.8, is that what you got?
taxes are 1,000, and then go 1,006,
About $58,
$58.
something like that.
Well, if you're paying $1,000 on taxes, you got a pretty nice piece of property too. It's not on Green Belt. So, well, I like to use that, but it's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
easy to figure it.
1,000, and figure 732 or something.
Do we don't have to
His taxes.
determine that this evening, do we?
He don't pay 1,000, he got a nice place, so, my dad.
Can they think about it
His
for
around
a few days
750,
and we, talk about it next week?
We could.
We don't have to decide that this evening, according to Russell. He says we can think about that for, take your numbers and look them over. I think that's, I think Russell's done a good job. He's gone through this thing pretty closely. You know, we possibly could go back and cut out $2,500,
Here or there.
you know, $3,000, getting $25,
To try to not.
get $25, get a 25, 20,
Is there, that usually ends up coming as a fund balance, because, yeah.
gotta put it back.
And right there,
But, I think
That's one of the reasons why I bumped over those small amounts. I mean, all in essence, what we put in for legal services we need, because I picked the bill up from the attorney today, we're gonna have to amend some more to be able just to cover this year.
although you get half of that back from the COVID deal. That was a lot.
I think we filed close to $13,000 worth of cost to the COVID thing.
Give them about 25 more.
I think just to put that in.
So that'd leave us a projected $92,000 cushion going into fund balance.
Somewhere between 90 to 100.
I think it'd be closer to 100.
It'd probably be closer to the 100 once you adjust the aggregate percentages.
Well, we don't have to decide today. You ready to be here next?
There you go. His thoughts on it.
You want to come back next week or?
School system will be here next week, the 9th, and then we can pick this discussion back up then. The comptroller's office has really pushed very hard this year, not just with us, it's everybody. They would love for counties to have budgets approved by June 30th, and I have a plan that we can do that. If we settle next week after we meet with the school system, and school system does not, we don't anticipate any kind of increase from them. They're basically going to ask that we maintain effort. There's no reason we cannot maintain effort, and there's no reason that we cannot give them growth that's in the tax rate. I do know that they are going to give their employees a 3% cost of living increase, but their folks have not had any kind of COLA increase in years. And the board is roughly using about $75,000 to $80,000 of their fund balance to also give a $500 one-time bonus to the non-teaching positions. So basically your cooks, your custodians, your bus drivers, those folks will get 3% that's permanent, and they will also sometime next fall get a $500 bonus as well. Teachers or certified staff, but
It's finally been heard.
I don't know.
receives 3%. It's balanced in that respect. They have approved it. That would be what the recommendation will be next week from the director of schools. And that would basically leave them asking for 86 cents on the tax rate, which is what they currently have. And that also would give them some projected, about $11,500 worth of projected growth, assuming that the actual numbers for the penny do not change dramatically, and I do not anticipate they will.
Back to the tax rate, if you do a 9 cent, that would be an increase of about 4.3%, say 4.5% of revenue. So they're paying $1,000, they'll pay $43 more.
Versus 58. Yeah. I think the commissioners now, being one of them, I think they would like to do a little more now, so they don't have to go down this road next year or the next 2 years, hopefully. But, you know, out in public, they ain't gonna like a penny.
No, they're not.
That's what I'm thinking,
That's
is
when
that
we make the big bucks.
the same conversation you're probably gonna get at 12 cents. It's gonna be the same conversation you're gonna get at 9 cents. I don't like it.
And you're gonna get the same 10 or 15 people every time, and then they're gonna forget all that.
But the answer to your question, if we can get things approved out of committee next Tuesday, that will give me time to get it ready to run, to set for the paper, which the earliest that I could get it in the paper would be June the 16th. The commission meets June the 17th. If we can finalize things next Tuesday, approve a tax rate out of committee, approve the budgets out of committee, then I can finish up, get ready to run the budgets in the paper, which we're required to do, present to the commission on the 17th, go to a recess session. We actually can come back and vote on this budget either the 29th or the 30th of June and actually approve it prior to the end of the fiscal year, which would make the comptroller's office, especially local finance, very happy that we're meeting that goal. And that was sort of what I've gone from the beginning, from the initial correspondence that we've had with them.
Well, their goals haven't been determined in the requirements.
But we absolutely will take an additional month and go into July if we need to.
If we need the additional month, we'll take the additional month. I mean, I've just got to set it to run in the paper.
Well, can we meet in the courtroom?
I hope our next county commission meeting, I hope will be up.
I was sort of thinking that was going to be what his
Yeah,
recommendation would
If we
be.
cannot, and I mean, this is gotta be up to the public comment and all, is that gonna?
That's a different meeting there, where you have like, remember on the county commission meeting, now we have an hour set aside for public comments, which might fill us this year. We don't, in the past, been getting anybody.
Well, I guess that's what, where I'm
23.
going.
Next time I talk to Rick, since he's the chairman, I'm gonna ask him if he's okay with having it in the courtroom next time. Maybe separate the chairs again, like we did, take out every other chair and put
But
it
if
down
we
on the floor.
can't, because of COVID-19, then what's it gonna do for the, public comment legally?
Well,
I don't know. Good
as of right now, the governor, unless he's extended it, it expires June 30th.
question. Yeah, it's true.
So we'll have,
But we're also, is it 50 or less or 100 or less now?
I know last I read it was 50, but he wants you to have social distancing. in there.
Even with the 50. So chances are, the 50 or less, we're probably borderline right there with that, using 50 or less to be able to do that.
Well, we'd probably be okay if we do 50 legally.
Yeah.
And I think we are to 50. I chose to leave it at 10 or less for this, since we're a little close quarters.
And I was gonna talk to Rick, see if he's okay with it, go back to the courtroom. I believe it's the 18th, isn't it?
It is.
To do the
Seven
public
days a
comment, could we open that hour for public comment and publish that we're gonna limit it to 50 people and that you'd be asked to exit after your comment?
Or you
and
could.
Only let in,
You very well could.
Let
let him come
anybody
and comment
else
and keep
in,
going. Yeah, we could
make your comment and
Because basically, you're looking at, there's 15 commissioners, myself, purchasing agent, the sheriff, county attorney, county clerk, we're at 20 people. That would give us 30 that we could play for audience participation.
They can stay outside and come in. If they want
I mean, I don't think we gotta do, I don't think the sheriff has to do, instruct the bailiffs on how we're gonna handle it.
Yeah.
I mean, we do just like we do court system, just when you're done, you leave. And we'd have the same rules on speaking, and we're gonna have 10 people talk about dogs. You know, one,
I think that'll work. We'll work out a plan for that, I think. that's-
And I mean, and technically, we have a wireless internet connection in the courtroom. We could actually still do a Zoom to where it's recorded that the public could hear and still post that recording. It's just, It's just not as conducive to do that,
Right.
but that would be an option as well.
Have we ever seen it full?
No,
There,
I'm just.
Sunday beer sales was the only time I've ever seen
Yeah,
it,
we had the budget the week before.
and we had maybe
Nobody.
5.
You'll have some folks show up this time.
With the
That's
tax, with the tax increases,
that's
the
kinda
mayor's
what we
right,
got.
we'll have a
That-
little bit of participation.
I think Russell's been very open and real with these numbers. I think these are numbers we're gonna be dealing with over the next 12 months. Any other comments? So let's, look this over, think about it this week, be prepared next week, come back, listen to the school system, be prepared to, have your comment or vote on, you want 9 cents or 12 cents. And then we'll go from there.
And
And look at it, if you can find
and-
a way to cut out 200.
And if it's all right with you, as the body, I will prepare a budget that is balanced using 9 cents. Because it's easier for me to put additional in as to try to take it out. So I can actually bring it back knowing we need 9 cents to balance with the recommendations that we've made tonight. And actually bring back the balanced budget, and then if you choose to do 12, it's me simply doing one entry to be able to increase it. You need to give me some direction to where, I mean, I can put 9 or 10, I can put 12, I mean,
The 12 was the number, I think, before we get to it. But if you shoot for it,
Or,
no, we've already had that discussion once. I mean, if that is the case, then I'll bring back a budget to you. If you want 12 cents to start, we'll put the 12 cents in, because again, the excess is it's just affecting the equity.
well, you said it's easier to add than to take out. So
It is easier to add than to take out.
let's go back with the
So I will,
9 or 10.
all right, well, I think it takes 9. With these recommendations, I'll prepare another budget that has 9 cents, and if you choose to go above 9, it's just me simply adding it to one line.
Everybody okay with that? Any comments?
And I think that gives us good information to start with, and if we want to put cushion in there, we know where we're building from. But we see where we hit the black, where the numbers turn black.
When the rubber meets the road at 9 cents.
you'll have to think about health and welfare of that other fund. Where you mentioned it's 550, wants to be around 8.
Oh, that's the fund balance here.
So that sounds, that's what your bond rate.
I mean, it does. I mean, now keep in mind, our current fund balance is 550. We started the year with 650. And through the year, and keep in mind, fund balance changes daily. Depends on how much flows out of my office determines what the fund balance is. And then it's based on what flows back into the county as well.
We get a lot of benefits from having that. Our bond rate.
And I mean, now keep in mind, the entire fund balance of the county general fund is about 1.6 million, but we typically reserve out about $1 million of that we technically earmark, that with your all's approval, we can shift that earmarking around any way you see fit. But to get to a true undesignated that we can use for any purpose, we're running about 650.
The different accounts or different offices or whatever, if they don't use money, it goes back into the fund balance at the end of the.
Any unused appropriation goes back in, and then you have to look at it 2 ways. You have to, at that point, when you turn the appropriation back over, then we get to true expense, but then we have to, once we get to true revenue minus the expense determines what we add or subtract. And I can actually even come up with some projections, but I only project them through the point in time that I run it.
Anything else? Is there any other matters which may duly come before this committee tonight? Anybody have anything else to bring up? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Thanks, sir. Thanks, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
I don't have that.
Everyone's
I
stoned.
just get flying.
All right, we are adjourned.
Well,
Same time next week.
kind of where we are, yeah.